This Amtrak not yet accounted for. We do know 6 people lost their lives so far. Let's bring in Deborah Hersman. She's the president and CEO of the National Safety Council, and she's the former NTSB chairman. Deb, we worked a lot of these stories together where you had to try and figure out what's going on. Let's start with what they're doing right now. We keep hearing from investigators in moments where we're not on TV that they've never seen anything this horrendous in terms of what happened to some of these cars, and that all aren't accounted for yet. What is that process? How do they get to that end point?
Well, you know, the best thing for investigators right now is the daylight, to be able to do their work, to gather the evidence, to document the scene, and really making sure that those first responders have the opportunity to really identify if there are any additional survivors. That's a key priority.
And this surveillance video that CNN got early this morning from the CSS company that shows those flashes, when you look at it as a trained eye, what do you see?
Well, you know, when they gather those videos, they're going to be looking to really corroborate any of that information that's on the video with onboard information on the recorders. They're going to look to see if there was any emergency braking, where the throttle positions were, any errors that might have been recorded, and they're going to be looking to see if there's any video, like forward-facing video on the front of those trains that actually sees what the track conditions are and identifies if there's any problems, not just for this train, but all of the trains that came through earlier.
And we want to talk a little bit more about the implications of this and what equipment was on this train and how it speaks to the infrastructure of the railways. We know this has been an issue. We know that there have been a high number of derailments for Amtrak specifically, so we'll get to that. But staying with the immediate here for a moment, speed is being mentioned by some of the guys on the scene there, and it's somewhat of an obvious consideration. But a lot of people have experience with this trip from D.C. to New York who are watching New Day right now. And this area, you're not usually going that fast. Isn't that right, Deb? I mean, not only is it a residential and commercial area, but it's not that far from the station. So terminal velocity shouldn't be as much of an issue, should it?
Well, I think in any situation, looking at the severity, you're going to be paying very close attention to the speed. And so they will be looking at that, how the train was being handled, what the speed restrictions were. And as far as the overrides, the train really does have some things that if the driver is incapacitated or they're exceeding the authorized speed, there really should be some intervention. So I know they're going to be looking very closely at those systems.
And, you know, again, what I'm setting up to you kind of is contradicted by just how destroyed some of these cars are. I mean, it seems like you would have to have a high rate of speed or momentum to create it, but obviously that's the task for investigators. This larger concern, Deb, about what equipment should be on these trains, what was not on this train yet, what this means about the infrastructure, what this means about Amtrak, are those legitimate criticisms and concerns going forward?
Look, across our country, we really have to invest in the infrastructure. Railroads are very capital intensive. You've got to maintain not just the track bed, the rails, the catenary and electrification for Amtrak. You've got to have cars and engines that are in good shape and that they're inspected a lot. And so all of those things are going to be very important to take a look at, but I think it's going to cause a lot of folks, including policymakers, to take a look at not just safety, but also at the investment on the infrastructure side too.
Now, is that something that just comes up, you know, in due course in these situations, or do you believe there are specific areas of concern that fall into, you know, why we're worried about something like this, that there is real risk involved that needs to be managed?
Well, I would say with respect to this investigation in this event, it will be, you know, a single event that they're going to take a look at, and they're going to find out what caused this. They'll make recommendations to prevent something like this from occurring in the future. But I think anytime you have a serious event like this, there really is a peeling back of all of the layers of the onion to try to understand not just the proximate cause of this derailment and the crash that resulted in fatalities, but all of the pieces of the puzzle.
You know, I've leaned on you a lot in situations like this, and you did a lot of excellent work for the NTSB. Can I ask you something? In your experience, I haven't seen cars twisted up like this. That girder that went through that entire car like that. People keep remarking here how they've not seen things like this, even as first responders with trains, and they can't believe how many walked away from it. How does it size up for you?
You know, unfortunately, we see some really tragic events when we see the worst case scenarios occur, whether it's on the rails, on the highways, or in aviation. There are a lot of really catastrophic events, but many of those events people do walk away from. That's why it's so important to learn the lessons, to build the better car, to make sure that people have better opportunities to evacuate safely. We didn't have a post-crash fire, and with all of those injuries last night and people who were hurt or incapacitated, that was a huge lifesaver.
Yeah, that's a key point. You know, when it looks as horrible as it does, it's tough to imagine it being worse, but you're saying that's right. There was no fire afterwards, and I guess that is a silver lining here. Deb, thank you very much. We'll lean on you as we start to get more information to get your perspective on this. Thanks for joining us on New Day. Allison.